All right, I want to take you back out to the memorial scene here. The report goes on to say, because of these failures of facilities maintenance and advanced preparation, the attacker fired most of his shots and likely murdered most of the innocent victims before any responder set foot in the building. Of approximately 142 rounds the attacker fired inside the building, it is almost certain that he rapidly fired over 100 of those rounds before any officer entered. So really just devastating information and facts that is being laid out in that report. Again, it says that most of the rounds were fired inside the building before any officers even entered the building. But again, we know from that leaked surveillance footage that was released on Tuesday, we saw many of the officers in that hallway. And once they did approach the classroom door, it appears in the video that many of them did retract. All right, again, now this is a video from the scene that day. Again, the investigative report detailing that many rounds in the shooting were fired before officers entered the school building, which is very unfortunate. We're going to take a short break here on Live Now from Fox. Any moment now, we should be getting an update, a live update out of Uvalde, Texas, regarding this report, which details systemic failures by law enforcement, but also they're not putting all the blame on the police. It also says that there was failures by the school itself and that the shooter's parents missed warning signs. That's up next here on Live Now from Fox. There's parents missing warning signs and maintenance failures by the school itself. All right, so we will bring you the latest and that news conference when it begins here on Live Now from Fox. Meantime, earlier this week, this surveillance footage of that shooting was released, and it shows that gunman walking into Robb Elementary School from an unlocked door and then opening fire into that classroom. And again, according to that report that was released today, rounds were fired before officers made it to that scene. Again, approximately 142 rounds were fired inside the building, and it is almost certain that he rapidly fired over 100 of those rounds before any officer entered, and the attacker fired most of his shots and likely murdered most of his innocent victims before any responder set foot in that building. Again, this video was published by the Austin American-Statesman newspaper, and you see there officers arrived on scene, and once some of them did approach that school classroom, it shows many of them back away, and that's the part that angered many people in the community and some of those victims' parents. And now we know, according to this report, there were a number of officers from different agencies in the hallway. And I want to get the exact numbers for you here. We know that there were 376 law enforcement officers responding to the shooting. 149 of them from U.S. Border Patrol, 91 state police officers, 25 of them were Uvalde City police officers, 16 were sheriff's deputies, and 5 were officers from the Uvalde School Police District. And much of the criticism has been directed at the former Uvalde Schools Police Chief Pete Arredondo, who acted as the incident commander during the shooting. And the committee has said law enforcement failed to quickly confront the suspect, having retreated to safety after taking gunfire and waiting for backup. Again, we are waiting to hear live remarks from Uvalde, Texas. Those remarks should be coming from some of those Texas state lawmakers who were part of this committee, and possibly from some of the victims' families. All right, now earlier this week, Live Now's Andrew Kraft spoke with a law enforcement expert who basically spoke to us about the impact of that video, basically analyzing the video. Here's more on that.
So much for being with us. Before we took you live, I saw you off camera watching the surveillance video. You were shaking your head. Your response?
Disgraceful performance. It's a very, very dark day for American law enforcement, and really, I am one of thousands and thousands of police officers all across this country who feel and think the exact same thing when they see a video. And there's a notice on the top of it. I don't know if you spotted it. I'm sure you did, where it said, "Screams of children, the sounds, are removed from the video." So those officers, in addition to hearing gunfire, they heard those screaming children and stood there. They retreated in the face of fire. Look, I get it. I get it. It's terrifying. But there's a gentleman who was on the camera a little earlier, says you signed up for it. You signed up for that. You signed up for at least the possibility that you would have to lay down your life in a situation just like this, and whoever was out there, absent, except those brave Border Patrol agents, you all failed.
David, we are putting up some of the video on the screen for our viewers, and we're showing the moment in the initial law enforcement response. And then, 3 or 4 of them more come in, but they were shot at. And that is why they retreated down the hallway to, scores of minutes later. They didn't re-engage. And so they kind of stayed in that entryway there, that other area of the adjoining hallway until, they did go in 77 minutes later to take out the shooter. David, there's been so many back and forth pieces of information that have been contradictory in this. One of which that we heard at the outset was that law enforcement who were inside the school were waiting for more shields, were waiting for more weapons to more confidently, I guess, engage the gunman. What we're seeing, though, is something that does not hold true. They had shields. They had lots of firepower.
Well, we know now that from the first moment they began to comment in the aftermath of this incident, there was not a single shred of truth. If you look at the shields, I was a master shield instructor in my law enforcement career, and I'm a big proponent of shields. First of all, the shields they had on site were not rifle rated. They were 3A, which means they were effective against handgun rounds only. But even so, you've got handguns, you've got long guns, you've got shotguns out there. You move down a hallway. If you're shot at, return fire. I will tell you this. I had the good fortune when I was an agent to be the training liaison with the Israeli security agency. And I was invited in, I don't know, it must have been 20 plus years ago to go to Israel and do a firearms instructor training school for the Israeli instructors in their academy. And I got a chance to see how they trained their officers, their personnel to engage active shooters. And there is one concept: attack the shooter. Because if you're attacking the shooter has to defend himself or herself and fire back. Maybe a horrible thing, but at least if that happens, they are not killing innocent people, particularly innocent children. If you go down, the next cop will get him. If that cop goes down, the next one will get him. The point is, the shooter is not able to continue the acts of violence against the most innocent, the most vulnerable, and the most deserving of our protection.
David, another kind of piece of information that came to light in some of the reports and investigations that are being done at the moment was law enforcement really did not know if one of the classroom doors was either locked or unlocked. According to some of these reports, presumably it was unlocked, but it was never tried. The handle was never tried, because we remember that was a major part of the plot line that the school police chief, Pete Arredondo, was frantic, trying to look for the janitor who had all of these keys to try to unlock the door into one of the classrooms. Not entirely the case.
Didn't stop the Border Patrol team, did it?
Right.
You have a locked school door, you have a shotgun, you have an open school door. This is just an absolute bald-faced lie. The fact of the matter is, you see officers, you see they're all decked out. They got their SWAT finest. They've got their helmets, they got their tactical vests, they got level 4 shields on the front of that soft body armor. They're doing position SOOL, they're doing all that cool stuff. But they're not moving down the hallway, and they're not engaging someone who, goodness gracious, there are children, little kids, screaming for their parents, screaming to be helped, and they don't go in. Risk your life.
Yeah.
If you die, at least you die doing them. Can you think of anything worth or that's worth dying for more than that? I can't even watch this video. And I'll tell you, a bunch of my friends who are all former tactical team leaders and trainers feel exactly the same way. We can't even watch this without being emotional.
Yeah, of course. Knowing what is happening while this video is going on, while you're watching the video, it makes your stomach drop. And it makes your heart beat very, very fast. I want to talk, though. We know Chief Arredondo has resigned his position in the city council. He assumed that position mere days after the shooting took place. The public, in an outcry, did not want him to serve in that capacity, and he has since resigned. I want to talk about individual Uvalde police officers, Uvalde School District police officers. We don't know their names. We don't know who they are. But we see them in this video. Are they to be held to account? And if so, what will be done, do you think? What can be done to hold them to account? They're going to have to live with this for the rest of their lives.
I can't imagine. I can't imagine a worse thing to live with. You know, I'm sure you remember in the Parkland shooting, the school resource officer lying again. I didn't know where the shots were. I'm sure you knew where the shots were coming from. Didn't go in. Didn't go in while children were being murdered. Same thing, the exact same thing here. They didn't go in, and the question as to whether they should be held accountable, absolutely. Every one of them, every single one of them. I don't know if there's any. Listen, you're not going to prosecute them. There's no. I mean, I can't think of any statute that might be applicable, but they should turn in their badges in disgrace. It's beyond belief.
Yeah,
it is really beyond belief. Another thing too, we do not train. In this country, we do not train law enforcement the way they need to be trained. We are busy making sure they get the right pronouns, making sure they have every other skill except what do they need in a situation like this? They need to be able to shoot quickly on the move at an individual who's shooting back and moving. And when I tell you, if I tell you that most police departments maybe qualify once or twice a year, which means shooting at paper targets, 50 rounds, do you really think? I mean, do you really think we are preparing our officers to engage a situation like that? We give you mentioned earlier they had shields. They're the wrong shields. They have no idea how to use the shields.
Okay.
I watch the tactics. I see stuff on TV on the YouTube how officers are being trained. It is a disservice to the American people that we allow that.
Yeah, I mean, talk about training even more for a minute, because we know in the weeks and months before the shooting took place, the school district, alongside the school police force, invested lots of money, taxpayer money, and did hold some of these mass shooter drills and trainings. But from the video, looking at the law enforcement response, two things kind of struck out to me. We know they were trained, and so to me watching, did they not act on their training? Or was it just pure fear, confusion, and chaos when the shots were ringing out and the training went out the window to a point where they were just kind of, destabilized into a state of shock where they could not function? I don't know. I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to get into their head about the response.
Well, I'll tell you exactly what it is. You know, when I hear people, I give you a perfect example. A young fellow I know just told me works for a major state police agency. Called me up, said, yeah, we just had active shooter training. Well, okay, lay it on me. What'd you do? Well, we had 4 hours. We did some room clearing drills. 4 hours of training? A day of training? This is not training. If you're watching this show right now, ask yourself, do you bowl? Do you play golf? It's like, I'll take a 4-hour lesson and hit the links with Tiger Woods. Training means you are learning a skill and you're practicing it repetitively. You become good at it. Not, in law enforcement, a lot of people say, you leave the academy, you're going to be the best shot, the best level of skill you're going to display is when you leave the academy. Well, that's pretty disgraceful. You should be better every year. And training, yeah. I propose this, tell them blue in the face. If you're a police officer, you're a federal agent, 1 day out of every month you should rotate through training. I know it'd be expensive. I know it'd be an administrative nightmare. But if you really want to know how the Israelis do it, that's how they do it. And that's why in a situation like this, the agents run in and take the shooter out.
Yeah. David, during the extent and the duration of the video, there were moments when you just kind of wince and cringe because you're thinking of the time that is being wasted. One officer, some of the other officers, checking their phone, other officers using the hand sanitizer in the school building, cleansing their hands. And then, a lot of times they were just looking at each other for an answer, and you could kind of tell no command structure. They didn't know what to do, who was in charge, many other jurisdictions in that vicinity, in that hallway. And so the chaos and confusion was there. It was on their faces. And so, I'm struck by the fact that, and we were showing the Uvalde City Council meeting yesterday to our viewers, the mayor, other city councilmen on the dais there, going after the media, after journalists for obtaining this video and releasing it, because the track record in the transparency of this investigation has not been so great. No doubt it must have been on the onus of journalists to release it, albeit unfortunately that some of the victims' families were not able to see it beforehand. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I mean, I was on another show earlier, and the father of a Parkland victim was very upset by that, and I get it. And I can't fault his reasoning. I think the families have to be
course not.
considered first. But this outrage that the mayor of Uvalde was displaying, do we remember the first couple days where he was throwing shade for the cops? I mean, I'm assuming at this point now, jumping on the anti-cop bandwagon is politically expedient. But don't you dare! You knew. When do you think they saw that video? Why do you think the DA from Uvalde didn't want to release it? Do you think they didn't see it? They saw it right away, and they saw it that night. There was no doubt in my mind. They knew the content, and then it was, this is not going to look good. It's not going to look good for us, not going to look good for every police agency. And you mentioned earlier about the command structure. Let me be very, very clear. There is no command structure in an active shooter incident.
Yeah,
You can set one up. You want to set up a command post, do all that. The officers individually go. There's no away for my sergeant, away for the TAC team. You go and you take care of business. That's it. And that's what the training has become post-Columbine, but I guess these guys didn't get the memo.
Okay. There's still a lot more to this. Of course, we'll be in full coverage on Sunday, David, as more of the video. We're not sure if it's going to be somewhat of the same that we've been seeing or something completely different. But the families, and they will be able to see it before the media does. And we'll be bringing on, hopefully, maybe you can join us as we break down more of this.
All right, so we continue to await that news conference that's expected to take place any moment now regarding the findings of this initial report by Texas state lawmakers on the police response into the Uvalde school shooting, the one where 21 innocent people lost their lives after a gunman walked into Robb Elementary School. Now, up next, after the break, we're going to go into what the report found regarding first responders, how they failed this community of Uvalde, Texas. That's up next. And you can see there that auditorium is filled with community members, and we possibly will be hearing from some of those families' victims, from some of those victims' family members, and likely members of the committee. Now, according to the reports, again, it's a 77-page document. They acknowledge that some of their findings may be disproven in the future. And actually, in the reports, they do not name and they also say the shooter's image does not appear in the report. They just do not want to glorify the shooter. And it goes on to say, quote, "We must not illude ourselves into a false sense of security by believing that, quote, this would not happen where we live. The people of Uvalde undoubtedly felt the same way. We must all take seriously the threats to security in our schools and the need to be properly prepared to confront active shooter scenarios," end of quote. So you see there, people continue to trickle into that auditorium as we continue to await the people who will be making remarks there at that news conference. All right, now we know from the report that 376 law enforcement officers responded to the shooting. However, the report found that there was no clear leadership once they arrived at the scene, and that responders lacked basic communications and necessary urgency to take down the gunman. Now, the investigation criticized the inaction of state and federal law enforcement who made up majority of the responding officers. It states 91 state police officers, 149 from U.S. Border Patrol, also 25 Uvalde City police officers, 16 sheriff's deputies, and 5 officers from the Uvalde School District Police responded to the scene. Until now, much of the criticism has been directed at former Uvalde Schools Police Chief Pete Arredondo, who acted as incident commander of the massacre. Now, the committee said law enforcement failed to quickly confront the suspect, having retreated to safety after taking gunfire, waiting for backup. Now, we have another Live Now look here at that auditorium. Just want to bring this up on your screens. That's the press pool. They appear to be interviewing a family member there. As you can imagine, this has just been a difficult time and a nightmare for that community and for those family members. And this report, it just isn't good what it has revealed. A systemic failure, as it says. Family of the shooter missing warning signs, maintenance failures by the school itself, and more than 300 law enforcement officers responding to the shooting, but no clear leadership once they arrived at the scene. So once this press conference starts, it will be interesting to hear what these family members think about this report. They were the first to get this report, so we will hear their thoughts on this. Now, the report goes on to say the committee said that law enforcement again failed to quickly confront the suspect, quote, they failed to prioritize saving lives of innocent victims over their own safety, end of quote. We're going to take a short break here on Live Now from Fox. Of course, as soon as that live news conference begins, we will bring that to you here on Live Now from Fox.
to figure out what the facts were and report it. It's a bipartisan committee. And the reason it's bipartisan is because the problems are not Republican problems, they're not Democrat problems, they're all of our problems. So I'm very proud the Speaker made this a bipartisan committee. There are other committees in the Texas House and Texas Senate that will look at this report, look at the facts that we found here, and discuss and debate the policy that needs to be changed to try to make Texas children safer going forward in the future. I'm a policymaker. My colleagues up here are policymakers that will have strong opinions about changes to policy that need to be done. Today is not the day that we're going to share what our strong feelings and convictions are about that. That was not the task of finding the facts. After some period of time, we will put our policymaker hats back on and share those opinions with the committee and others about what we think needs to change and what's done. But right now, we're going to let the report speak for itself and focus on the facts that were found in there. The committee met with more than 35 witnesses. Those were done in executive session. That is the precedent of the House in the past and will likely be the precedent of the House going forward. Being an executive session, meaning the people and witnesses who attended did not have the cameras on them and did not testify for the public at large to hear. We believe that that probably allowed us to get their testimony quicker, and also they were more candid and more conversational, allowing us to do our job more accurately. Other committees in the state of Texas do have subpoena power and will have the opportunity to subpoena those witnesses for y'all to hear what they have to say for themselves. But that is the precedent of the House for an investigative committee to do this in executive session, which is what we did. In addition to the 35 witnesses that we interviewed, there were 39 independent interviews that our investigators, who did a phenomenal job, held to help us. We reviewed crime scene photos, audio and video from the incident, 911 calls. All of that went into trying to get this report compiled in 44 days so that we could deliver this here to Uvalde, and hopefully you will find this reflective of the facts that we basically could get to. Let me tell you a little bit about the report. We talk about the Uvalde Consolidated Independent School District. And let me say this. With hindsight, we can say the Robb Elementary was not adequately prepared for the risk of a school shooter. The school's 5-foot fence was inadequate. Despite a policy of locked doors, there was a regrettable culture of noncompliance. In fact, all 3 exterior doors to the building were unlocked that day, and multiple interior doors were not secured the day of the shooting. When I talked about the false sense of security, I do not believe that Uvalde Consolidated or Robb Elementary is the only school with these issues in it. I've talked to enough other educators around the state to believe this is a wider problem that we need to continue to look at. We discussed the attacker. You will first notice we did not use his name. When we wanted to release the hallway video to the members of the families and the public, we were not going to show his image. He wanted that, and he did not deserve it. He did not deserve to have that recognition of his face or his name shown because it's what he wanted. Also, there are cultures online who look and believe that when they see these videos, there's something to be inspired by. We did not want others to look at these videos and to watch it and be inspired by it. We only wanted to show the law enforcement response. However, we did give you a more comprehensive look at the background of the attacker. We refer to him that throughout the report because that's how he refers to by the alert training. He fits the profile of many. He came from a broken home with little to no interaction with his father. He struggled in school, both academically and socially. He struggled to fit in and eventually became isolated. He networked with his peers through social media and violent video games, and ultimately had a fixation on school shootings and even developed the nickname School Shooter. We also talk in this report about the failures of law enforcement. There's really 2 categories to think about when we talk about this. There is an early decision to treat this as an active shooter versus a barricaded subject situation. If you know, and the training and standards we set for officers is if you know there's active shooting, active killing going on, or somebody is dying, the standard is you have to continue to do something to stop that killing or stop that dying. That day, several officers in the hallway or in that building knew or should have known there was dying in that classroom. And they should have done more, acted with urgency. Tried the door handles, tried to go in through the windows, tried to distract him, tried to do something to address the situation. In fairness, there were many officers at that scene who were either denied access to the building, were told misinformation, some were even told false information. Some were told the police chief of the Consolidated Independent School District was actually inside the room actively negotiating with a suitor, such that they did not know what was happening. They did not have the opportunity to do that. But that's not where the analysis stops. Everyone who came on the scene talked about this being chaotic. The training suggests that that chaos should not happen. Inside the school, there should be a tactical commander, someone who's taking lead on dealing with the actual in the hallway. But there should also be an overall commander. Somebody who's an overall command, flowing the information, making sure everybody knows what is going on. The fact that there was no overall commander outside the building, where there should have been one, should have been known by many. At a minimum, there was multiple opportunities, depending on the relative training and experience of law enforcement officers, to at least ask more questions or offer their guidance to try to remedy the chaotic situation and make sure there was effective overall command. There was a lack of effective overall command that day. I'm going to recognize my colleagues for some brief statements, and then we will answer the questions here today. Representative Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Joe Moody, a Democrat from El Paso. I'm a former prosecutor. I've worked on issues like criminal law and mental health for my entire legislative career. And most importantly, I'm a father of 3. And sadly, I've dealt with mass shootings before. In just 2 weeks, it'll be the 3rd anniversary of the day a young man with a rifle murdered 23 people in El Paso. After that, we all kept asking why. Why did this happen to us? We're here today to provide some of those answers in Uvalde. And while this information will never make up for the unspeakable loss this community has endured, El Pasoans know how important it is to know. I also know the report we've given points to something very complex. It's hard to hear that there were multiple systemic failures because we want to tell ourselves that systems work. We want to tell ourselves there's one person we could point our fingers at. We want to tell ourselves that this won't happen again. That's just not true. What happened here is complicated. But there's also a call to action in this report, because systems are something that we can and must improve. I see the report as a baseline of information that we can all work from. So often these days, politics starts with the answer and doesn't even care about the facts. Here, we're starting with the facts, the most thorough, reliable report that's been done on what happened at Robb Elementary. There's more to do, but this report is a shared platform for us to work from together. The shootings in Uvalde and El Paso have important differences. So do Midland, Odessa, and Sutherland Springs, and Santa Fe, and on and on. But they also have important similarities that we can understand and address as a state. Although today isn't the day for that discussion, that's what this report can and must lead to. I made a promise to the people of El Paso that I haven't forgotten and that I will never forget. to do everything in my power to make sure the legislature understands what happened and why, and to fight for the solutions that we deserve. I make that same promise here today in Uvalde. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Moody. Justice Guzman.
Good afternoon. I'm Eva Guzman. I'm a former Texas Supreme Court judge, and I'm the public member of this committee. For the past several weeks, we have traveled to Uvalde and to take testimony, to hear firsthand what took place and in pursuit of the truth. We did so at the request of Texas House Speaker Dade Phelan, who charged us with delivering answers to the families who lost their loved ones and who seek to understand what happened that day. How could there be so many multiple systemic failures? As our state and our country mourn the tragic deaths at Robb Elementary, our committee unpacked the evidence to discover and report the facts. As a former judge, I spent much of my professional life ensuring that the facts I relied on to make decisions were accurate. I brought to this process that same determination. After all, accurate facts have to provide the backdrop for any policy changes that will come out of this. Throughout the investigative process, our only agenda was to follow the facts and the evidence. As John Adams famously said, whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passion, they cannot alter the state of the facts and the evidence. That's where we placed our focus. There, we found the truth about what really happened at Robb Elementary that day. But we also found the reality of the breakdowns in procedures and protocols and processes, of the breakdowns and failures in judgment and decision-making that occurred before and during the tragedy. That truth, it's heavy and it's hard because it lays bare human failures and it makes us confront collapses in our systems. They were supposed to work. They were supposed to protect the innocents who now lie in their graves. Today we stand before a community that's still gripped in grief. With this report, families who are crushed by sorrow and pain will now have desperately needed and deserved answers. But no report can heal the broken hearts. Only God can do that. Knowing the truth, we hope, will equip Texas lawmakers and leaders with information and knowledge that will guide them in deciding next steps. We hope the truth about this tragedy will also give this community the resolve to forge a path forward. I come here with humility and respect, and I am here for you, for the people of Uvalde.
Thank you. Pursuant to the House rules, before a question is asked, we will have to have a witness affirmation form, or as I said, you can email it to the committee clerk. Are we ready for questions at this time, Matt? Okay. Yeah.
When you ask your question, could you tell us your name and what news affiliate you represent? So with that, we'll start with the media with questions. Could you state your name and your affiliation? Thanks.
So what I am telling you is we have substantive committees that have already been formed. The governor formed those early on, and the Speaker of the House formed it at the same time. 44 days ago, this has been done. They've already been working on this. We now have some baseline information we can report to the legislature, help them basically make some decisions about systemic failures. I think each community can look at the things we've laid out in this report and make some determinations about how to prevent that from happening. I will tell you, not as a legislator, not as a chairman of this committee, but as a father, I have asked teachers at my schools, principals at my schools, and others about some of the things that we learned to find out what the culture is and intend to continue to work on it. I think it takes everybody to continue to ask questions. Next question. Okay. Thank you, I'm going to start with this. I'm going to ask my colleagues if they want to comment on it as well. Multiple systemic failures. Our report does not look at other comments that have been made to try to compare or contrast them whatsoever. We laid out the basic facts as we were charged with to do. And what I said early on about law enforcement, the officers who knew or should have known that this was an active shooter situation by their training experience should have done more. We are very clear on that. Not every officer on the scene had that same information and had that same opportunity to comply with their training. One of the things this committee has not done, because we're a three-person committee, is to go through and determine which law enforcement personnel knew what did they know, and when they knew it. In order to do that, I think that's going to take many months to go through all of the different video, body camera footage, and to figure out, and I think there's other investigatory arms trying to figure out what did this person know, when did they know it, and what did they do with it. And I think you're going to need all of that to try to make all of those questions. But we do say there was chaos on the scene, and certainly with the chaos, people should have asked, why is there not an incident commander? Why there's not an overall commander outside the building helping try to organize that? Representative Moody of Justice Guzman, would you hold on a second? I was going to let them do this.
One of the things that we've learned from this is the importance of an incident commander and the information that's relayed out. We know we didn't have that here, and you're asking why the information was told the way it was. Who knew what, when? The failure to have an incident commander on the scene to receive information and to communicate with the media, I believe, in part led to some of the information that was reported inaccurately.
Okay. Representative Moody.
Just to dovetail on that, because I think the question is looking at maybe how information flow went post the incident. And there is a section in the report about information flow and how we believe that it is incumbent upon law enforcement as they make reports to report what is verifiable, understand what is verifiable and what is not verifiable. So when the chairman talks about multiple systemic failures, one of those is the handling of information in this investigation, and that's why it's in the report in that section.
Okay. Next question. Yes, over here. Oh, we're on the next question.
Could we just hold it to one follow-up and give everyone else a chance? Rosa, go ahead.
So what I'm going to tell you is this. Today is about what the committee was tasked to do. It was tasked to come up with the facts. And that is what the committee was charged with by the Speaker. After a modicum of time, and by the way, there are other substantive committees that have explained this, looking at the policy and is going to debate everything. After a modicum of time, out of respect for this report, all of us, I assume, will have the opportunity to make the comments about the policy, the changes, our feelings, and what we think ought to be done. But today is not that day. If you ask me that question again, sooner than later, I'll answer it for you. I'll be glad to answer it for you, and I think the members of this committee would be happy to do that. Just not today, out of respect for what we've been asked to do and the report that we have. Hold on a second. Name and who you're with. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to tell you, it's a great question, and it's one that I wish I was in a position to answer about all of the mechanics of it. We spent 44 days looking at the facts to lay those out. You know, each different officer who is connected to an agency is going to have to do their own internal review. Everybody's going to have to figure out, as I said, who knew what and when. And if somebody failed to exercise their training, if somebody knew there were victims in there being killed or dying and did not do more, I believe those agencies will have to find accountability for those officers. But that is not what we are tasked with in this report to come with. And I understand that, but the limit, what we have done is put the facts forward so others can take a look at that. Representative Moody or Justice Guzman?
Those facts will allow those agencies to take a deeper dive into the actions of law enforcement and hold them accountable. The report says if you're not willing to put the lives of the people you serve, of those children, before your own, in my view, you should find another job.
Oh, it's public record. I mean, everyone has it at this point in time.
Next question. The lady in the hat over here. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. I actually learned from it from your reporting for the first time. It was not a meeting that we organized. We came at the mayor's invitation. I don't know the specifics of it. Had not had a chance to actually find out, but certainly there is nobody that I'm not willing to visit with and help understand, deliver a copy to. And if somebody, a family member did not go into the meeting, I'd love to know the circumstances, love to sit down and visit with them, happy to do that one-on-one, but, that was not, I did not ask anybody, obviously, not to be there.
And NBC back there in the dress. Go ahead, yeah.
So the answer to that is we will go with the House precedent on investigatory committees. When a House investigatory committee is formed, we do our work in executive session, and the documents that were delivered, most of those I legally cannot release unless I'm given permission to from a non-disclosure agreement. I've tweeted about that and made people aware, and happy to share the non-disclosure agreement with you. But, our hands are tied by precedent and some of the things that we had to do to obtain this. And also, I don't know if there's any other investigations that have been alluded to, but I wouldn't do anything without consultation with the investigators in order to get something done to make sure they're okay with it, to jeopardize that.
The person in the glasses with their hand. Thank you.
We are not advised at this time. You're going to have to talk to, the different individuals, the agency heads, and again, I'm assuming they're going through a very complicated review of looking at body cam footage to figure out what information was actually available, what was not, those types of things, and we do not have able to do that.
The lady in the back with the face mask. I know there's a lot, but you know who I'm talking about, right there in the glasses.
To make sure I understood your comment, in my report, I think I've got it. So in my report, I laid out that there is up to 80,000 school buildings that the children of Texas attend throughout the days of the school year. And does it seem like a Herculean task to actually overcome that? I'm going to make a quick comment, but I think my colleagues want to make sure they get a chance to answer as well. We put that fact in there to make sure that when we talk about school hardening and school safety measures or whatever that is, people remember there are 80,000 buildings in the state of Texas. And that is, but you know what? We have to recognize that as we talk about this policy. Representative Moody, would you?
had an opportunity to visit with educators from Rob, not just during this process, but today as well, and that idea of security and safety in moving forward, specifically for them and for this community, is something that they're focused on, and we are helping focus on that with them. But I think that the broader point about lessons learned and moving forward, and why that number is important to know, is that it is a large task. But our priorities, if our priorities are safety and security of our kids, then that is the task at hand. And so the job that we had here to set out facts to understand what's going on, that is an important fact to know. And my kids are in 2 of those campuses back home, and so do I care about that? Am I going to visit with folks back home like the chairman has? Absolutely. And then we have an obligation going forward at the state level as well.
Justice Guzman.
There's a section in the report on the school and the administrators. It's my hope that every school district takes some time to read this report. There were multiple systemic failures, including not locking doors. I hope that every school district can look at this report and glean something from the lessons, this unfortunate and tragic.
The lady standing up in the dress by the cameras.
Hi there. I'm Maria Guerrero with NBC5 in Dallas, Fort Worth. Please afford me 2 questions. One is for your reaction and another is for his statements. The mayor of Uvalde, it looks like, following the release of your report, placed the city's police chief on leave to determine whether he should have taken over command that horrible day. What is your reaction as a committee who looks also at the city? What is your reaction to this decision? And based on your findings, should he have taken command? That wasn't extremely clear in the findings.
So the question was about the mayor's most recent actions. I saw him earlier. He made mention of that. I don't know if our report, gave him the emphasis to be able to do that or not. I'm not aware. But obviously, you would need to talk to the mayor, and I respect the mayor's decisions, after reading the report, into doing, what he thinks needs to be done to protect the people of Uvalde. The second question that you asked was, remind me?
No, should he have, based on what you guys found out, should he, the police chief of the city, taken over command?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we do not specify which officers should have taken over command in here, because that'd be kind of a little bit of our opinion as to who should have. What I will tell you is this. There were officers in that building who knew or should have known more needed to be done. And there was also officers who should have seen some of the chaos going on, and at least, at a minimum, if they didn't take over command or try to assume command, they should have began asking questions or offered their support and guidance. And eventually, maybe they would have gotten command to have a better response from that.
Lady in the front row, go ahead.
Oh.
Okay, go ahead.
The report says most of these babies were killed in that first barrage of gunfire before officers ever stepped foot inside of that building. How many could have been saved still is not known. How do you guys know that? And when will, are you going to have experts? Will families know that information as far as who may have been able to be saved at some point?
So
How will that change your investigation?
there are autopsies and medical examiners that we do not have access to, and I do not believe have been complete. I've never been a doctor. I've never gone back in and done forensic exams. I'm not qualified to basically tell you who would or not have. We've talked to enough to know what we were able to say, and obviously if we get more information, this is a preliminary report. I want to be very candid. The decision that we made was we have done at least enough at this point in time to be able to issue a preliminary report. I am not telling you it's conclusive, and I think there's other things out there. That's certainly one of them that could be done.
Lady in the front row, please. State your name and your affiliation. Thank you.
Federal, we don't have we do not have jurisdiction over federal officers, agents to basically, force them to comply with the subpoena to bring them in. So that's one of the things that, we did not, and a lot of them have body cameras.
Lady in the back row with your hand up, please. You got a follow-up? Okay, go ahead. We got short time, so let's try and move it along.
Before you
All right.
ask that, Representative Moody wants to follow up on that as well. I want to make sure he has good time as well. Hold on. Representative Moody's going to comment on that first. Okay.
We'll get to
She
you.
has a
We'll
follow-up
get to you.
question. Just for a matter of completeness, while we didn't have the ability to compel participation, there were statements taken from federal agents. Those we did have the opportunity to review and understand, but there's a difference between reading a statement and having the opportunity to question somebody live. So that's for context.
Okay, back behind me here, this gentleman.
So that was confirmed to us by the investigation being done by the FBI and the DPS. They confirmed that with the video evidence, as far as it, and certainly that's commensurate with, I think, what you hear when you hear the audio and sound of that nature.
Okay, you good? Okay.
It was in the first.
Justice Guzman has something to follow up on real
It
quick.
was in the first 2.5 minutes. The report says 100 rounds were fired.
All right. Thank you. Go ahead.
Can I do a Spanish?
Yes.
El reporte preliminar habla que no hay un responsable, que no hay un villano. ¿Qué va a pasar con los agentes involucrados? Posiblemente se le pueda aplicar cargos. El mensaje en español para mucha gente que no sabe inglés.
La pregunta es sobre el villano. El reportaje identifica un villano, el que mató a los niños. La segunda parte de la pregunta es, ¿qué va a pasar con los del departamento?
All right, so the three-member committee speaking there, providing an update on what they have determined regarding the school shooting that took place in Uvalde, Texas. Overall, they said that Robb Elementary School was not adequately prepared to have an armed intruder on campus. They also mentioned that there was a lack of overall command, no incident commander on person. They also mentioned that they hope with this report, other communities will look at this report and learn from it. Now, they spoke briefly about the shooter, how he struggled in school and with his peers, and even had the nickname, quotes, school shooter. They also said that if responding agencies did not act in the way that is expected of them, that they should be held accountable. Let's go ahead and continue to listen in here on Live Now from Fox.
Did he explain why he did not follow his own report? Second, this is coming from the community. Maybe we are asking people to translate this report into Spanish and distribute that.
Yeah, second question is a phenomenal question. Justice Guzman has brought that to my attention multiple times, as is Representative Moody. Yes, absolutely, it is only appropriate to do that, and that will be done. Your first question had to do with Chief Arredondo, and as far as taking over command. In our report, we did put some specific quotes from him in there. I would direct the audience and you and everybody to what he actually said and quote him directly. But essentially, he testified that he felt like he was not in command. That all being said, he certainly during that day, took actions, and I think would agree and did agree that if anybody was in charge of at least the response south of the door versus north, it was him, at least until Bortak arrived and took over the tactical command, and they're the ones who made entry.
Okay, lady in the back by the camera with her hand up. Yes.
Let me say this, that I think Representative Moody, I'm going to let him answer it, and then Justice Guzman, and make sure she be able to translate parts of it, what she wants to say in Spanish. It is clear that this report does try to address the impact of the misinformation on the community. Who knew what, when, and how it flowed was clearly issues and has created some problems, and the back part of the report certainly does touch on that. And our report speaks to that very directly, very clearly. And I want to thank Representative Moody for taking part of the lead on helping that, and I'd like him to be able to give the opportunity to say some more, and I'm going to let Justice Guzman speak to that some more as well.
As we worked on this and understood that there were multiple systemic failures in security and in police response and in the life of the attacker, right? And how those systems that we have didn't address any of that. What became very evident to us also was that the information flow exacerbated the pain of this community that was told to us multiple times. That those the back and forth or the out of context or the mistruths or half-truths were harmful in and of themselves. And so it was, as we discussed multiple systemic failures, we said we have to address that this portion of the investigation was also a failure and has caused a rightfully cynical approach to the way this committee has done its business, even though, as the chairman stated, this is the way investigative committees always work. But when you lay that on, we don't operate in a vacuum. When you lay that on top of the situation as it was, or as it is, then you have to address it and put it forward. That's why it's in the report. Because our job, and we saw it very clearly, is not to add to that confusion, but to create stable, level ground that unifies facts that we can then build from. There are many of us that in this community and across the state that want to know where we go next in a lot of different areas. I know as policymakers, we're going to turn that corner and do that too. But you cannot do that without a stabilizing force of facts. That was our mission here. That's why we addressed the fact that information flow was part of the systemic failure that occurred here in Uvalde.
Justice Guzman.
Quiero clarificar que el reporte se va a traducir a español en las próximas semanas. La pregunta... Claro, la pregunta es sobre...
All right, the three-member committee there, speaking in Spanish, the community of Uvalde has a large Hispanic community. Again, that reports released by that investigative committee made up of some Texas state lawmakers says that it was a systemic failure, not only from law enforcement, but also the school wasn't adequately prepared for such an attack, and also the parents of the shooter missed warning signs. And it goes on to say, again, police failed to prioritize saving lives of innocent victims over their own safety. It's unknown if a quicker response could have saved more lives, and no one ensured that responders making key decisions inside the building received information. So some disturbing details coming out of this report. Again, a 77-page report. The committee saying that it took them 44 days to conduct interviews, to analyze the facts. That's all that they wanted to do here. And they just want to make sure that other communities learn from this. Let's go ahead and continue to listen in.
So two things in the report. We go to great pains to try to set what actually the context of that statement related to the evacuation. I think when you read it all together, I'll do that. Let me address the key, because I think this is very important. A lot of questions have asked about it. The statements from BORTAC were, yes, they put a key in the door and they unlocked it. There is enough information to be very uncertain whether or not that door was ever locked. The committee believes, based on all the testimony and information we've received, it was very likely that door was either not locked or secured at the time. However, I am not willing to tell you with 100% absolute certainty that we know, and we may never know, whether or not that door was actually locked and secured at that time. But there's a strong emphasis, and we put it in the report, that it is more likely than not, very strong, that if somebody had just gone up and tried the door handle, they could have opened it without a key.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That'll be it for today. We've got to get to Mass. The Archbishop has invited us, and we're going to move on out. Thank you so much.
All right, and as you saw there, one of those community members asking the committee, what are you going to do? Speak to us. They want some kind of action. We have seen throughout the country people demanding, gun reform, but that's a whole nother topic here. Today, we are discussing the details of this report, a 77-page report that details systemic failures by law enforcement in Uvalde, Texas. This comes after the mass shooting that left 19 students dead and 2 teachers as well. And again, that 3-member committee says that Robb Elementary